jQuery is probably the most famous JavaScript client-side library. It's a great utility library. It lets you do a lot of things, but the main things it lets you do that you would use when you're doing Wakanda is it lets you access the DOM, which is basically all your elements on your page, you know, like your divs and your inputs and your whatever. It lets you grab references to those, and then it has a whole bunch of methods, utility methods, to let you do things like change the style or delete something and add something back to the DOM dynamically. It has some other functions, like it has a HTTP request handler. I don't use that because Wakanda has that already. So when I want to save data, I use Wakanda. But I do use, another thing that jQuery does is it lets you set event handlers. And even though Wakanda has automatic event handlers for its GUI objects, I still end up using jQuery for doing stuff that Wakanda doesn't have in the current version, or something specific that Wakanda doesn't do. So it's nice to know jQuery to supplement your, Wakanda development. So let me ask you a question. How many people in here have seen a live Wakanda application yet? Or anything, have you guys seen a real application? Like something being used, not just a demo. So I'm gonna show you one first that, yes, question up here.
What about the place where you do the reviews of the presentations? Was that done with Wakanda?
Yes, it was. Yeah, the scheduling application is done with Wakanda. That's running on a server somewhere in the world that I don't know, and that was done with Wakanda. I'm going to show you really quickly one more, and in this application, I had to use jQuery for different things, and I'm going to show you what I used it for. So let's do that, and then we'll talk about jQuery, and then we'll go eat some lunch. So here's a paid time off application that I built for our office, and just going to show you a little bit of this. Did I type that in? Oh, it's spinning. There you go. So we've logged in. Now, in this client, you can request new time off, and right there where I'm getting that calendar up, I used a jQuery UI plugin because I wanted some custom behavior. Also, we show a calendar of everybody who has time off. And this is a live application. This is for our San Jose office. And this calendar is a jQuery UI plugin that somebody wrote. So I've used that. I'll show you one more thing that I've done, and then we're going to go look at the actual jQuery function and library. So this is a piece that I wrote for the payroll person. This user interface is not exactly, part of this was an experiment. This is an accordion. At the time I built this, there was no accordion widget in Wakanda. And I didn't even use an accordion widget from somebody else. I just built this accordion widget using jQuery. And all I did is define an HTML element, and then I used jQuery at runtime to apply styles and event handlers, and all of a sudden I have this, interface object. So with jQuery, you can do all kind of things like that. So without further ado, let's go look at jQuery. So I'm going to fire up a Wakanda project here. And I have some examples set up. And so we're going to go take a look at this page. Load it on up. You know what, let's just clear our browser data, make sure I get the right version here. Okay, so here we go. We're going to learn about jQuery. And the first thing you can see is you can't see those 4 sections very good. So this is an example of how we can actually use jQuery. So I have my script in here, and we're going to start talking about jQuery. So, what is jQuery? jQuery is a JavaScript library. It's a function. You pass in parameters. It will give you reference to DOM objects, and then you can call all these different methods to do things. So, for instance, on my page, I have a container 3. So this is the jQuery function. You can either use the $sign or actually type jQuery. It's the same, it references the same function. So the parameter that I'm going to pass to jQuery is actually a DOM ID of a container, and I want to set, now once you have a reference to an object, you can call methods, and one of them is CSS, where I can say, set the opacity to 1. So if I go back here to this page, all of a sudden, on container 3, now you can see it. So I could do that at runtime. So those are the kind of things you can do with jQuery, and we're going to go look at the library a little more. So if we go and look, I'm going to first look at this object in the debugger. So inspect element. How many people have used Chrome Developer Tools? Okay, a few. You're going to want to get used to this tool if you're going to be doing, web programming, because you need to, look at things in the debugger and what's happening with them. So if we go look in the debugger, we can see that I have an unordered list, and I've set a class. This is a CSS thing. Everybody knows CSS a little bit, cascading style sheets. You can create style sheets, and you can reference them in your object. So anyway, this class and this ID gives me kind of a pointer to these objects. And then over here in my this is my JavaScript code. I'm going to I'm going to get set here. Where the heck am I? Okay, so I'm going to grab a reference using jQuery. If I pass in this element name, I'm going to get a reference to all the unordered lists. Now that I have that reference, then I can do commands against that. So for instance, let's look at this one instead. So for instance, instead of every unordered list, I could just do unordered list.states. These are CSS references. So the same type of thing you type in your CSS file, you could type here. And I'll get the children, and then I could log that on the console, and we could see that I have a reference to that. So I'm going to clear this. I'm going to reload this page and bring up the console. And you can see I logged, the actual variable that I created. This is a jQuery object, and now I have access to that object, and I can go start to do things with it. So you can do all kinds of ways to reference objects. In fact, I might just type this and get in the debugger and just do it in there. So if we clear that. So you can do these commands right from the debugger. So I'll get the list of cities. And now this exists. And see, now I have access to these objects. And once I have that object, then I can do these different jQuery methods. Like, for instance, I can add a class. I've set up a CSS style called loud. And so I can apply that at runtime. So if we look at these in the inspect these elements, then you could see that was dynamically added. our class of loud. So one of the things that jQuery, and jQuery is, there's almost infinite number of ways to grab DOM elements. And we'll look a little more at that. You can go grab all the list items and apply some CSS styling at runtime. You could grab just the list items for a certain parent. You could grab, I'll show you if we look at some of these other commands. So if we have, like, let's go do some, like here's something kind of interesting. Okay, so let's go do that. I'm going to clear that out. And in fact, let's get this up a little more. So right here, I'm going to say, okay, jQuery, find me the unordered list that has a class of states, but I want to find just the second child and add a class of error. So there you can see New York is set to red. So I could actually, change this and go get, I have to do this, hold on. I could say, no, I want the third class, not the 34th. Hold on, get out of there. I'm kind of frozen. Let's just do this again. Okay, third one. And it gets the third one. So basically, you could see that you could do all kinds of operations at runtime and run logic based on circumstance to say, okay, I want to go through, I want to traverse this list and maybe, set this to a different color or make this thing show and hide. I do a lot of that in my application using jQuery to show and hide elements when, depending on the user's login, different things like that. So this is kind of boring. Let's look at, but anyway, so that's one thing you can do. So now let's go and look at a little bit of event handling. You can look at this a little more. So I'm going to use jQuery again. Whoop, that didn't, not what I want. Uncomment. Let's get rid of that. Now, I use jQuery again to set the opacity of container 3 to, not see it and bring up the one on event handling. So we reload the page, and now we can see that. So that's a technique that you might want to use. This one has just a couple of buttons, and we're going to show how we can set some event handlers. So once again, we use the same parameters to pass into the jQuery method, but this time, so we're telling it, look for all buttons in container 4. Nice thing about jQuery is, you can set event handlers right here. We're going to set event handlers for every button we find in container 4. .on is setting an event handler. On click, execute my function. It's as simple as that. It's very easy. So if we go look at that in our page, just reload that. A button was clicked. Button was clicked. If we had, if we add more buttons into our container, we don't have to change that jQuery statement because it automatically will dynamically add those in. But let's do something a little more interesting than that. I don't want you guys totally bored here. So, one thing I'll tell you, right here, every time you pass parameters into the jQuery object, it has to go and do some work traversing the DOM to create that jQuery object that you can then call methods against. If you're going to call a lot of methods against a certain group of elements, then what you want to do is cache that query into an object so that jQuery doesn't have to go do it over and over again. So now we did that. We created So my Events 101 container is a jQuery object that points to the container. Now we're going to do something a little better with our event handlers. So now, well, actually, I don't need it out there. I'll do it inside here. Where am I? Okay. Here we go. So two things. So this is where we're going to get a pointer to our container. This, when we have a jQuery event handler, this will have a reference to the object that was clicked. So when we click the moon button, we have this event handler will execute, and we'll have this will point to moon, and when you click sun, this will point to sun. Okay, so it's a runtime instance. So now let's do this. Every time someone clicks a button, let's set the background. There's a reference to our container. We're going to use jQuery again to set the background to yellow. It's going to reload that. So there we go. But both buttons set the background to yellow, sun or moon. So let's keep going. Let's comment out that one. Let's just go for the custom behavior. So there, now we want to set a different background color depending on which button we click. So I've set in the two buttons, let's go look at them, inspect them. And the reason I'm doing it this way is because you have to get used to doing this if you're going to do web applications. So if we go in here, we can look at runtime on these buttons, and you can see that we have, let me see if I can get this highlighted with data. You know what it's just going to do? Do you see this? Data color equals yellow. And where's this one? Data color equals red. So that's an attribute of our HTML element. And we can read that attribute with jQuery. So we use jQuery to read that color attribute using the data method, and we set that to a variable. And then instead of just setting the background to yellow all the time, we can set it to the color based on the data attribute that was in our HTML element. So that gives you a little better, nicer behavior. So we reload this, set it to yellow, and let's see if we need anything else. I think I got that. So maybe we just need to, I got that up. Hitting your save button is a good technique. I'm going to have a whole class about that. Sun, moon. Now, that's a very simple example, but that's the kind of things you're going to be, doing with jQuery. And let's just review that a little bit. So there's a lot of things you can pass into jQuery to tell it what you want to handle to. You can get the book and find out, you can pass in element names, you can pass in CSS style selectors. You can use custom jQuery selectors. There's actually methods, you can chain other methods. You can definitely, with jQuery, get any selection of objects you want. And then once you have that jQuery object, then you can do a lot of things. You can query those objects to find out properties. You can set properties. You can add styles. You can remove styles. You can set event handlers. You can remove handlers. You can do a lot of stuff. So let's do one more thing here. Let's not. Where's my monitor? How much time do we have? Anybody know when this class is over? 12:15. So we got about 25 minutes. Okay. Then let's just move on. So I'm going to comment this part out again. And I think we'll have time. I'll actually jump into my source code for my Wakanda application and show you where I've used these actual techniques. But we'll do one more thing. Who loves Spider-Man? Everybody. Show of hands. Spider-Man? Anybody? Okay, so let's look at the Spider-Man section. Okay, so we've used jQuery again. And what I have here, if we look at this element, then where is it? Okay. This is a definition list. That's just another HTML element that you may not use that often. It's very much like an unordered list, except that an unordered list only has list items. A definition list has list items, but they're broken into title and definition. So you get a little more granular with those. So what we're going to do with jQuery is we're going to take this definition list. As you can see, we have a title, and then the DD definition is the text. And then we have another title and items. So, right here, this doesn't do anything. We're going to turn this into an accordion with jQuery. So, let's go do that. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to find all the definitions, all the DD elements, and we're going to hide them. So now let's run this. Okay, so there we go, and that's hidden. So they're there, but they're hidden, and you can't see them. So let's hide all but the first one. So now we're going to use, so you can see we've done our best practice. We know that we want to reference to the DD elements. We know we're going to be calling different jQuery methods against those, so we're going to cache that into this variable. And here we go. This is another jQuery method called filter. So instead of hiding all of the DD elements, we want to hide everything, the fourth one down. And that will give us a little bit of better behavior. So we're on our way to, did I save? Oh, get rid of that. Let's try that. There we go. So now we got the behavior we want. When we first load the page, we want the first one to be open. But what we want is when somebody clicks on one, that it opens up that one and closes the other one. So let's go look at how we do that. So we need an event handler. So on mouse enter of the title, so this will point to the title. This object will point to the title, and that title is these elements here. So if we hover, and we're doing mouse enter, so basically we're not doing it on a click. We can do it on click, but we're going to do it on hover. So when we have a hover event on the title, then we want to move to the next element and then show it. And we want to take anything else that had been open before and hide it. So is that making sense to everybody, what we're doing in the event handler? We're basically hovering over a title. We're going to open up the definition below that title. And if there were any other definitions, that's where the sibling commands comes in. If there were any other DDs that were open before, we're going to close those. So let's go see what our behavior looks like now. So there we go. Pretty sweet. And using jQuery, I mean, that is really easy. Now, accordion is one type of UI element you might want to create. The thing you can do with HTML and CSS and jQuery, you could take any kind of DOM elements and use your imagination and create your own user interface, maybe your own type of widget that doesn't exist, that you've never seen, by moving it around, hiding it, and it's very powerful, and it's so easy. You could, learn this. If I could learn it, you could learn it. So let's clean this up. Oh, so let's do something a little nicer. Let's go look at the behavior we have now. So it's a little jerky. jQuery actually has animation. And we can make the behavior a little nicer. So let's do that. I'm just going to skip down to this. We'll talk about that. So now you see it's a little bit slower. In fact, we could slow it down more. So slide down is basically like show, except that it's animated. And jQuery handles all that for you. You could write all that stuff yourself, but why? Why do it? See that? Really slowed down. So, it's fun to play with. Okay, what do we have, 15 minutes? Why don't we, those are the basics of what I use jQuery for. I'm going to close this project. The nice thing about jQuery, so many people have built things on top of it. In fact, Wakanda uses jQuery because why write that stuff yourself? And there's a million plugins, UI things, elements built on top of jQuery. So if you're going to do web development, jQuery is something almost everybody uses. So know it and love it. So let's go back here. This is I have a lot of pages. I'm going to close some of these pages up. Don't need all these. I might need that one, actually. Well, we'll start from scratch. Give me a second. I got way too many. This was from my last session. Okay. In fact, I'm going to close this. Let's look at this page here. So you saw the example of Spider-Man. And I did the same thing. I showed you this in the beginning, right? Invalid login. Let's try. Oh, hold on. This is not my live system. So many things. So I've built the same kind of thing here for, not that this is the greatest interface for this application, but I wanted to experiment with using Wakanda Data Provider API on the client. There's two APIs for Wakanda on the client. There's a high-level one called Data Sources, which binds your data from the server to your widgets. But then there's a lower-level one called the Data Provider API. In this case, this is not a Wakanda widget. So I use the Data Provider API to get data that I can use, and then I use jQuery to create this thing. So if we go look at the source code, here's the container, and you have to look at the source, actually. And I have a definition list in here somewhere. There it is. So at runtime, before runtime, all I have is a DL tag. No titles, no definitions, nothing. And what I do is we'll have to look at the scripts, payroll.js. Now, this is, okay, so this is maybe a little daunting, but it just goes to show you. Here, when I At runtime, I call this build user request accordion. And I'm going to try to hide some of this for a second. There we go. So I use jQuery, just like you've seen. That is my definition list. I point to it. And the first thing I do is I find all the children, which will be the DTs and the DDs, and I remove them. So I have a fresh slate in case it was already loaded. Now, this is the Wakanda Data Provider API, DS. I say, go to the user class, grab me all the users. You don't have to understand all of this code right here, but you can give you an example of what you can do. Now, to create my accordion, I want that data passed to me in a very specific order. I want the username, and then for each username, so right here I do a query. I'm doing an asynchronous query, and I get passed back an event. That will be the user object. And then when I get that object right here, I want to get the entity collection and loop through that. And then I'll get each user, right here as I'm looping through that collection. So once I have a user, I want to create, using jQuery. Another thing you can do with jQuery is create DOM elements. I want to create my DOM element. So you can see I'm creating a DOM element, and this is the way you do it, and I'm appending it to my definition list. Then I want to go out and get all the PTO requests for that user. This gets a little big. You will soon be doing this with the Wakanda. You know, this is a little more complex than just the drag and drop, but it shows you that you have access to these really low-level APIs. When you get more advanced with an application, you want to go beyond drag and drop a widget, right? You want to have the power to go get whatever data you want. So you have that power. So I go from that user object, I use the relation attribute that's in the data model, and I get the collection of PTOs. And then I loop through that collection. And that's an asynchronous call that gives me a PTO. And actually, once I get the paid time off request, I actually get all the line items for that request, and I loop through those, and then this is where I'm creating the DD definition list. Anyway, you don't have to understand all that code, but it's actually just one call to fill up that accordion. And that call, you know, the beauty about Wakanda is you have this kind of power, control. I'm navigating through my data source at the back, and I'm actually hitting 3 tables to build that accordion. Let me show you that model. So I'm doing a query of all the users, and if I turn this on, I'll select it. And for each user, I'm grabbing their PTOs. And then for each PTO, I'm grabbing their request line items. And I'm able to get that data in any order I want. The Wakanda Data Provider API is very powerful. And for this application, yeah, the data is passed back in JSON. In fact, we can look at that. So anyway, we'll show the network debugger so you can see the data passed back and forth. So let's do that. And anyway, I get the data, and I can build this accordion. I don't have much. This is my sample app. I don't have much data. Here, let's go grab a little bit. We might go on the live app if we. Oh, that's export. All right, sorry. Okay, so there's my data. Now, let's take a look at the network debugger and watch the data that comes across. So we can go here, and I'm going to go hit that again. So that's a lot of requests, but let's take a look at this. Can I open that up a little more? So you can see I did a request for the users, And there is JSON data. And these are, and you can see, we could do a whole class on this, but yeah, the data is passed back as JSON objects. It's it's text readable there, and the browser debugger will show you that. And then as I went through my loop asking for other data, then you could see right there, I'm grabbing a request line item. And so that's what all those requests are. So how much time we got? 10 minutes. Okay, let's do some questions. Anybody? Right there.
Would you regard Chrome as being the best environment to test these things as opposed to Firefox or Safari?
I like Chrome, but they're all great. I prefer Chrome, but there's not a big disadvantage. I mean, Firefox and Safari both have great debuggers. In fact, they're so similar. So it's really a preference. All three of those are great. It's what you're used to. I like Chrome, but you could use all three of those. And they almost all look the same. In fact, let's open up Safari, and I think you'll notice that it's pretty similar. In fact, let me grab this URL here. I can't believe I'm close to having 3 of my sessions done for the day. It's sweet. So if we go here, and this is Safari, and we open up, now I have this debugger kind of set here, but you can see if we log in, where am I in? This one. Okay. And very similar. Not much difference. I like Chrome, but they're almost exactly alike. Kent Wilbur, think of a question. Okay, that guy right there.
There's a way to delegate this, I would assume, from the client side to the server side, and just push it all out of one block.
Oh, you have every option imaginable. In fact, let me show you something that you need to get. In fact, this is a site you might want to go to. I have an example of that. Where is it? There. This is a project that I wrote where, no, that's not it. Where's my project on? I don't see it. Delete selection. Oh, it's on the Learning Center. I'm sorry. Let's go here. I have a sample app where I show all the different ways to use the data provider API, how to get your data in pieces, how to get your data all back at once. Let's go there. Learning Center. Okay, so are you guys all familiar with the Learning Center? Sure. Oh, let's go back. So you're familiar with wakanda.org. If you're going to use Wakanda, got to be here. It's all the documentation. There is the Learning Center. And in the Learning Center, there's some technical notes. That gentleman asked about the data provider API. There happens to be a tech note I've written called A Closer Look at the Data Provider API. And it talks about exactly what you're asking, and it comes with a sample application. It talks about the different ways that you can get your data. And you can get your data in almost any way you can imagine. You could go actually, like that data for the accordion, which I got in pieces with different queries, I could have got all that at once in one time. So the nice thing, the reason it's broken up that way is, of course, it's up to you as a developer. If you know that the data population is small enough, and hey, just go out to the server, write a custom server-side method. You do the queries on the server, grab your data, and return that object however you want to the client. And I show an example of that in this tech note. This tech note comes with a sample application that you can download and actually run. In fact, I'm going to show you that. What the heck? Kill some time. Why were there posts? We would have to ask the engineers about that. I could go back and look. You know what? After this thing, I'm happy to go online and we can take a look in more detail on that. Most of them should have been gets, but there could have been a post. But let's go look really quick at that solution, if I can find it before somebody comes in here. Data provider example. Sweet, found it. Where's my anybody? Oh, there it is. Okay, I'm going to open this up just to show you some of the and you have to clear out your. It had the old thing loaded there. Okay, this is a sample Wakanda application, and it has, we can get in a little into this. It has a very simple model of cities. And what I'm doing here is I'm using the data provider API. This is just a div, and I show you what I'm doing. This code is actually the code that's in these buttons. You can go look at the actual code. So I'm showing you the different ways to use the data provider API. And in this first method, it actually doesn't load all the cities. It only loads the first 40, and it fails. And I explain to you why. And the next example uses the data provider API and uses the for each to loop through the results. And you can see it took 60 milliseconds, but we got all the cities. The third example, and we can look at the network debugger and see how many, and we'll look at that. This uses a different way to load the cities, and you can see it's much faster. And this one uses a custom method and grabs the cities. And we can see the difference. I'm going to show you the network debugger here, and then we're done. So let's go back here. You can see we made a lot of calls to the server. I'm going to clear that. But we still got all the cities. Now you can see we made a lot of calls to this. Oh, that's the same one. No wonder we made a lot of calls to the server. Let's go do this third one. Third way, a little bit different way to use the data provider API. 2 calls to the server. And clear that. The fourth way, which I wrote a method, custom method, 1 call. So that example is available from the Learning Center, and that would answer your question. You could play with that and see all your options. The thing is, it's great. You have all those options because sometimes you don't want to load it all at once. You want it deferred. And sometimes you want it all at once. So you as a developer have control. Any questions? Anything? Yeah. You have a lot of control. You have the 2 client-side APIs, the high-level one that's when you can manage your widgets and it gets data. And the high-level one uses the lower-level one to shuffle data back and forth, and you can access right into the lower-level one. That's what we did today. So I think that's it. Who's up for lunch? I'm done. Thank you.